Welcome to the South Defense.
Okay, so let's dive in. We're looking today at a really fascinating strategic shift in Burkina Faso, a country you often hear about, unfortunately, in terms of instability.
That's right.
And the material we've got here, the sources, they really focus on a key moment, that military coup in 2022, led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré.
Yeah, and that event seems to have just completely changed the country's direction.
Yeah.
Especially, its relationships with other countries.
Right. And the background here is key, isn't it? The sources point to growing insecurity. You had armed groups, terror attacks across the Sahel.
Exactly. It really pushed the new military government. They needed new defense partners strategically. They were actively looking, trying to find partners they felt were maybe more responsive.
So let's tie to the old ways, perhaps.
Yeah, less constrained by, history or traditional Western influence. It seems to be the implication in the reports.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think, especially if you're tracking defense tech, military affairs, or just, how the geopolitical map is changing. Because the material describes a pretty sharp turn, doesn't it? Moving away from former colonial partners like France.
A very noticeable distancing, yeah.
And pivoting clearly towards others, particularly Turkey and Russia. It really looks like a significant geopolitical realignment happening right there in the Sahel.
Which is a region, as you know, traditionally under heavy Western influence. So, yeah, it's a big shift.
Absolutely. So our mission here, what we want to do, is really dig into what these reports, these sources, are saying about the specifics.
Focusing on that defense cooperation, particularly with Turkey, as it's really highlighted,
Right.
and what the sources claim the impact has been.
Right. So if you're following these kinds of international dynamics, or maybe you're just curious about how countries adapt their security strategies in, really tough environments,
then this should be a really compelling look at a real-world example playing out right now.
Okay, let's get into it then. So first off, what really jumps out from the material is how fast this new direction seems to have developed, especially that relationship with Turkey.
Yeah, definitely. The analysis we're looking at suggests Ankara was notably quick to respond when Burkina Faso reached out.
Which fits a pattern, maybe.
It seems to align, with Turkey's wider strategy. Expanding influence in Africa, using defense diplomacy, military-industrial cooperation. It's often framed as part of President Erdogan's push to position Turkey as, a major alternative global player.
And since that coup in 2022, the reports are pretty clear that Traoré's government has increasingly pulled back from those long-standing French ties.
And solidified links with others, like Russia and, as we said, Turkey. That's the core of this repositioning the sources describe in the Sahel.
And looking closer at the Turkey connection, the sources get quite specific, don't they, about the actual cooperation?
They do. It mentions military training, help with defense equipment, and just closer ties between the defense ministries themselves.
But what really catches the eye is the hardware. Specific, advanced weapon systems and vehicles reportedly coming from Turkish companies.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting for the tech side of things.
The sources mention they got the Bayraktar TB2 drone. Now, if you follow defense tech at all, you'll know the TB2.
Oh, yeah. The UAV from Bayraktar. It's gotten huge attention globally, hasn't it? For how effective it's been in asymmetric conflicts, its strike capabilities.
Precision strikes, yeah. But it wasn't just the TB2, right?
No. The reports also say Burkina Faso is using the Akıncı UAV, also from Bayraktar.
And that one's a different beast altogether.
It's a much heavier duty system, a strategic combat drone, flies higher, longer, carries a much bigger payload. Rockets, missiles, smart bombs, the works.
Okay, so a huge boost to their air power with these specific advanced drones. But it wasn't just air power. The sources also mentioned ground forces getting upgrades.
Right. They reportedly acquired the Ejder Yalçın 4x4 armored vehicle. That's from Neural Makina, another Turkish company.
And what's special about that vehicle, according to the reports?
Well, it's highlighted specifically for its protection. High ballistic protection and resistance to mines, and crucially, IEDs, improvised explosive devices.
Which makes it ideal for the kind of threats they're facing.
Exactly. Suited for those high-risk combat zones. Carries about 11 personnel. Used by Turkish forces, too, and exported elsewhere.
And, to make those drones really count, you need the right munitions. The reports say they bought smart munitions, too.
Yes, specifically the MAM-L and MAM-T from Roketsan, another big Turkish defense firm.
Okay, break those down for us. MAL.
So the MAM-L, that's described as a high-precision warhead, but smaller, designed for drones like the TB2. Good against light armor, artillery, militia positions, that sort of thing.
And the MAM-T.
That's the heavier one. Bigger punch, longer range.
Yeah.
Designed for the bigger drones, like the Akıncı.
It's interesting they went for these specific guided munitions. It suggests a clear strategy.
Well, the thinking, based on the sources, seems to be that strengthening both air and ground forces with these specific modern systems was vital.
Goal being?
To respond quickly, effectively, hit targets accurately, and basically shrink the operating space for those armed militias.
Fantastic.
Take away their freedom of movement.
And this all fits into that bigger picture of Turkey's growing role in Africa that the sources describe.
It does. Ankara''s stepping up involvement across the continent with a strong focus on the defense sector. This cooperation with Burkina Faso is presented as a real vote of confidence in the Turkish defense industry.
Which the sources call, interestingly, one of the world's emerging powers in drones and combat vehicles.
That's the language used, yeah.
Okay, so what about results? What do the sources say actually happened on the ground with all this new capability?
Well, the accounts suggest that having these specific UAVs and modern armored vehicles has made a difference, both tactically and psychologically.
How so?
These armed groups, they apparently used to exploit weaknesses in the army's surveillance, how quickly they can move, and their ability to strike precisely. These new systems seem to counter that directly.
And the sources do mention some concrete successes, military operations reclaiming territory.
Yes, areas previously under militant control have reportedly been retaken by government forces, according to the material.
And this is apparently down to?
It's attributed, at least partly, to reported improvements in intelligence, gathering better eyes in the sky, you could say. Also military logistics and that air and ground surveillance capability we mentioned.
All enhanced by these new partnerships and these specific systems.
According to the information provided, yes. There's also a note about reforms within the military command itself, helping with internal stability, reducing the chance of more, internal problems.
The sources also, provide a bit of background, reminding us that Burkina Faso, or Upper Volta as it was, has had a rough history since independence from France in 1960, political turmoil, economic struggles.
Internal conflicts, yeah, and then layered on top this ongoing threat from extremist groups. It's been a really challenging situation.
Right, and a current government's moves are presented as decisive steps to fundamentally change that.
A conscious choice, it seems, based on the reports, to restructure their defense, shore up their political position, and actively seek out partners they felt would genuinely help build national power.
Not just offer the same old aid packages.
Something different, yeah. More focused on capability building, it appears.
So reading between the lines, the picture emerging from this material is of Burkina Faso trying to carve out a new path, appearing more stable, more resilient.
And notably, more technologically advanced, specifically in defense. The claim in the sources is that the armed forces are now significantly more professional, organized, and combat-ready.
And that this is largely thanks to this focused cooperation, especially with Turkey.
That's the narrative presented.
Right.
Burkina Faso charting a new course, gaining more respect, becoming more sovereign and secure.
Okay, pulling it all together then. We saw how Burkina Faso, facing these huge security threats, reportedly made this strategic pivot.
Moved away from traditional partners, built new defense ties, with Turkey being a really prominent example in the sources we looked at.
We looked at the specifics mentioned in the material military training assistance, but critically getting hold of those advanced systems.
Right, the Bayraktar TB2, the Akıncı drones, the Ejder Yalçın armored vehicles, and those MAM-T smart munitions, and the rationale behind acquiring those particular items.
And the result, according to the report, seems to be significant gains on the ground, reclaiming territory, gaining advantages over armed groups, improving stability.
And building a more capable military overall, portraying Burkina Faso as sort of emerging differently in the region.
So yeah, this case really shows how urgent security needs can just force rapid changes in alliances.
And dictate the type of defense technology countries go after, especially in these asymmetric conflicts. What's really insightful from the sources is the detail on why these specific systems were seen as so crucial.
So when you look at what the sources describe about the impact, the tangible effect of getting these modern precision capabilities, advanced drones, protected vehicles designed for this kind of warfare.
For high-risk zones.
What might this specific real-world case study tell us, or maybe suggest, about where defense strategies could be heading in similar conflict zones elsewhere?
That's a really interesting question to leave people with, isn't it? It really makes you think about how targeted technology is reshaping, well, state power and the dynamics within regions.
Don't forget to hit subscribe if you want to stay ahead of the biggest shifts in aerospace, geopolitics, and defense innovation.